At 34, Wolfgang Van Halen has finally begun to speak more openly about his life with his legendary father, Eddie Van Halen. For many fans, Eddie was not just a musician. He was a guitar hero who helped shape the sound of rock music for decades as the driving force behind the band Van Halen. But for Wolfgang, Eddie was simply Dad. Growing up in such a famous family meant living a life that was very different from most children. Cameras, concerts, and fans were always part of the background. However, behind the bright lights of fame, Wolfgang experienced a quieter and more personal side of his father. Many people saw Eddie as a rock legend who could create magical sound with guitar, but at home he was also a curious, funny, and loving parent who enjoyed spending time with his son. Wolfgang has said that his childhood was filled with music, but it was never forced on him. Instead, instruments were simply around the house, waiting to be explored. This natural environment helped Wolfgang develop a love for music at a young age. While other kids were learning simple school lessons, he was already listening closely to guitar riffs, drum patterns, and melodies. Over time, music became a language that connected father and son. Even though Eddie's career placed a huge spotlight on the family, Wolfgang often remembers the small and meaningful moments the most. Simple things like watching his father experiment with sound in the studio or joking around at home created memories that stayed with him forever. As Wolfgang grew older, he realized that living in the shadow of such a legendary musician would not be easy. Yet his father never asked him to follow a certain path. Instead, Eddie encouraged him to explore music freely and find his own voice. That supportive approach shaped Wolfgang's life and laid the foundation for the musician he would later become. From a very early age, music felt like a natural part of Wolfgang's life. Being surrounded by guitars, amplifiers, and recording equipment meant he was always curious about how sounds were created. His father, Eddie Van Halen, believed that creativity worked best when it was discovered naturally rather than forced through strict lessons. Because of this, Wolfgang was free to explore instruments whenever he wanted. One of the first instruments that truly caught his attention was the drums. When he was about 9 years old, he began experimenting with rhythm by simply tapping along to songs he heard around the house. Seeing his son's interest, Eddie decided to support that curiosity in a special way. On Wolfgang's 10th birthday, he gave him a Real drum set. For Wolfgang, this was more than just a present. It was a moment that showed his father believed in his musical curiosity. Soon, the house often echoed with drum beats as Wolfgang practiced and experimented with different rhythms. Sometimes Eddie would record small musical ideas on a tape recorder and let his son try to play along. These small creative moments slowly turned into bonding experiences between them. Over time, Wolfgang did not limit himself to just the drums. His curiosity led him to pick up other instruments as well. He began teaching himself guitar, bass, and even piano. Unlike many young musicians who feel pressure to copy their famous parents, Wolfgang tried to focus on discovering his own sound. He respected his father's talent, but did not want to become a simple imitation. Instead, he wanted to learn the deeper language of music. Hours of quiet practice helped him develop a strong understanding of melody, rhythm, and arrangement. By his early teenage years, it was clear that Wolfgang had real musical ability. His natural talent and dedication would soon lead him to a moment that surprised many fans of the famous Van Halen legacy. In 2006, the rock world was surprised by a major announcement involving the legendary band Van Halen. At just 15 years old, Wolfgang Van Halen joined the band as its new bassist, replacing longtime member Michael Anthony. For many fans, the decision created mixed reactions. Some people wondered if Wolfgang had been chosen simply because he was the son of Eddie Van Halen. Others were curious to see whether such a young musician could handle the pressure of performing with one of the most famous rock bands in history. But those who knew Wolfgang personally understood that he had spent years quietly learning the band's music. Growing up around rehearsals and recording sessions meant he had heard these songs thousands of times. By the time he joined the group, he already knew the music deeply. Stepping onto huge stages at such a young age could have been overwhelming, but Wolfgang approached the experience with calm focus. He respected the band's history and understood how important those songs were fans. At the same time, performing alongside his father made the experience deeply personal. Every concert became a shared moment between father and son. The energy of the crowd, the bright lights, and the powerful sound of music created memories that would last a lifetime. Critics who initially doubted Wolfgang's abilities soon noticed his confidence and musical skill. His bass playing was solid, energetic, and supportive of the band's classic sound. Instead of trying to stand in the spotlight, he focused on helping the music feel strong and alive. Over time, even skeptical fans began to accept him as part of the band's new chapter. For Wolfgang, however, the most meaningful part of the experience was not fame or praise. It was a chance to stand on stage beside his father and share the music that had always connected them. Touring with Van Halen gave Wolfgang Van Halen an unforgettable view of life as a professional musician. Night after night, he stood on stage in front of thousands of cheering fans while performing songs that had shaped the history of rock music. Yet behind the excitement of touring, Wolfgang was also witnessing a more serious side of his father's life. Over the years, Eddie Van Halen had faced many personal struggles, including health problems that slowly became more difficult to ignore. Despite these challenges, Eddie remained deeply passionate about music and performing. Being on stage seemed to give him energy and purpose. For Wolfgang, those tours became a time of deep connection with his father. They traveled together, rehearsed together, and shared quiet conversations away from the spotlight. These simple moments were often more meaningful than the concerts themselves. Wolfgang has later explained that performing with his father allowed them to spend valuable time together, especially during the years when Eddie's health was uncertain. Music became a bridge that helped them stay close even during difficult times. In 2012, the band released the album A Different Kind of Truth, their first studio album in more than 14 years. Wolfgang's bass playing on the record showed his growth as a musician. His style was confident and supportive, giving space for his father's guitar work while still adding his own creative touch. For many listeners, the album felt like a powerful reminder that the spirit of Van Halen was still alive. But for Wolfgang, the project meant something even deeper. It was another opportunity to create music side by side with his father. Each song became part of a shared story that would later hold great emotional meaning. To understand Wolfgang's story, it is important to remember the enormous influence of his father, Eddie Van Halen. Eddie was widely considered one of the greatest guitar players in rock history. His innovative playing style helped change the way people thought about the instrument. One of his most famous techniques involved tapping on the guitar's fretboard with both hands, creating fast and flowing patterns of sound. This approach amazed musicians around the world and inspired countless young guitar players to experiment with new ideas. Eddie's creativity did not stop there. He was known for building his own instruments, including the famous Frankenstrat guitar, which he assembled from different parts. His goal was always to find new sounds rather than follow traditional rules. One memorable moment in his career came when he played the unforgettable guitar solo on the song Beat It by Michael Jackson. The powerful solo helped bring rock guitar into mainstream pop music and showed how versatile Eddie's talent truly was. However, behind the success and creativity, Eddie also faced many personal struggles. Like many artists who experience intense fame and pressure, he battled addiction for several years. These challenges affected both his career and his family life. Despite these difficulties, Eddie remained deeply devoted to music and to the people he loved. Wolfgang has often spoken about how complex his father could be. To the public, Eddie was a fearless guitar hero. At home, he was a thoughtful person who cared deeply about his family and wanted the best for his son. Understanding both sides of his father helped Wolfgang see him not only as a legend, but also as a human being who faced real struggles and emotions. As the years passed, the health struggles of Eddie Van Halen became more serious. He had been battling cancer for a long time, and although he continued to stay strong for his family and his music, the illness slowly took its toll. When Eddie passed away in 2020, the world of rock music felt a deep loss. Fans around the globe mourned the guitarist who had inspired generations. For Wolfgang Van Halen, however, the loss was deeply personal. He had not only lost a musical partner, but also his father and closest mentor. In the months that followed, Wolfgang struggled with grief while also facing public attention. Many fans wondered what would happen to the Van Halen legacy and whether Wolfgang would continue performing the band's famous songs. Surprisingly, he made a decision that shocked some listeners. Wolfgang chose not to perform many classic Van Halen songs during his own shows. For him, those songs carried powerful memories connected to his father. Playing them without Eddie felt emotionally difficult. Instead, Wolfgang focused on creating his own music and honoring his father's influence in a different way. He formed his own project, allowing him to express his creativity without constantly being compared to the past. This decision showed that Wolfgang wanted to respect his father's legacy while still building his own identity as a musician. Over time, fans began to understand that his choice came from a place of love and respect rather than distance. By following his own path, Wolfgang continues to keep the spirit of music alive while remembering the father who helped shape his life. After the passing of Eddie Van Halen, many people wondered what direction Wolfgang Van Halen would take with his career. For years, he had been known mainly as the son of a legendary guitarist and as a member of the band Van Halen. But with his father gone, Wolfgang began to focus more seriously on building something that truly belonged to him. Instead of simply continuing the legacy of the past, he decided to create a new musical project where he could express his own ideas and emotions. This led to the creation of his band Mammoth WVH. The name itself carried special meaning. It was inspired by an early name used by Van Halen before the band became famous, which allowed Wolfgang to quietly honor his father while still moving forward with his own identity. One remarkable thing about this project is that Wolfgang recorded almost every instrument on the album himself. He played guitar, bass, drums, and also handled the vocals. This approach showed how much he had grown as a musician over the years. It also proved that his talent went far beyond simply being part of his father's band. His music blended elements of rock, melody, and modern production, while still carrying hints of the influences he grew up with. For Wolfgang, creating this music was not only a professional step, but also an emotional one. Writing songs helped him process the grief and memories connected to his father. Some of the lyrics reflected personal feelings about loss, family, and the complicated emotions that follow the death of someone so important. Through this new chapter, Wolfgang began to show the world that he was not just carrying the Van Halen name. He was also building his own legacy, one song at a time, while keeping the spirit of creativity that his father had always encouraged. As Wolfgang continued sharing more about his life, fans began to see a clearer picture of what it meant to grow up with someone like Eddie Van Halen as a father. Many people imagine that life in a famous family is always glamorous and exciting, but Wolfgang has explained that it also came with its own challenges. Being the son of such a legendary musician meant that people constantly compared him to his father. From the moment he stepped onto a stage, audiences wondered whether he could live up to the reputation of the Van Halen name. This pressure could have easily discouraged a young musician, but Wolfgang tried to approach it with patience and honesty. Instead of competing with his father's legacy, he chose to respect it while slowly developing his own voice. Over time, fans began to appreciate his humility and dedication. Wolfgang has also spoken about how important his family relationships were during difficult moments. His mother, actress Valerie Bertinelli, played a key role in providing support and stability throughout his life. She often encouraged him to stay grounded and remember that his value was not defined only by fame or music. These lessons helped Wolfgang navigate both the excitement and the pressure of the entertainment world. In interviews, he has shared stories that reveal the lighter side of his father's personality. Eddie was known for being playful and curious, sometimes acting more like an excited kid experimenting with sounds than a world-famous rock star. These memories remind fans that behind the powerful guitar solos and huge stadium concerts was a man who loved spending time with his family. By sharing these personal stories, Wolfgang has helped humanize the legend and show a side of his father that many fans never saw before. Today, at the age of 34, Wolfgang Van Halen stands at an interesting point in his life and career. The shadow of his father, Eddie Van Halen, will always be part of his story, but it no longer defines every step he takes. Instead, Wolfgang is gradually shaping his own identity as a musician, songwriter, and performer. His work with Mammoth WVH has received positive reactions from both critics and fans, many of whom admire his dedication and honesty. By writing deeply personal songs and performing multiple instruments, Wolfgang has shown that his musical talent is genuine and versatile. At the same time, He continues to honor his father's memory in subtle and respectful ways. He often speaks with gratitude about the lessons that he taught him, especially the idea that music should always come from curiosity and passion rather than pressure. That philosophy continues to guide Wolfgang's creative process today. For many fans of the Van Halen legacy, watching Wolfgang grow into his own artist has been both emotional and inspiring. It reminds them that the spirit of creativity that defined Eddie's career did not disappear with his passing. Instead, it continues to the next generation in a new and evolving form. Wolfgang's story is not simply about carrying a famous name. It is about finding balance between honoring the past and building a future. By sharing his experiences and emotions openly, he has helped fans understand that behind every legendary musician is a family, a set of personal struggles, and a deep love for music. In that way, Wolfgang's journey continues the story of the Van Halen legacy while also writing an entirely new chapter of his OW. As time passes, Wolfgang Van Halen continues to reflect on the many lessons he learned from his father, Eddie Van Halen. One of the most important lessons was the idea that music should always be about creativity and exploration rather than fame or competition. Eddie often approached the guitar like a puzzle waiting to be solved. He believed that every musician should experiment, take risks, and discover sound that felt exciting and new. This mindset deeply influenced Wolfgang's own approach to music. Instead of trying to recreate the past, he focuses on creating something honest and meaningful. In many interviews, Wolfgang has explained that his father never pushed him to follow a specific path in music. Eddie did not expect him to become a guitarist or even join the band Van Halen. What he cared about most was that his son enjoyed the process of making music. This freedom allowed Wolfgang to develop confidence and curiosity as a young musician. Today, those same qualities can still be seen in the way he writes and records songs. He often experiments with different sounds, melodies, and arrangements, just as his father once did. Another lesson Wolfgang learned from Eddie was the importance of staying humble despite success. Even though Eddie was admired around the world, he often acted like someone who was still learning and discovering new ideas. That attitude helped Wolfgang understand that great musicians never stop growing. They continue to learn, improve, and challenge themselves. By remembering these lessons, Wolfgang keeps his father's spirit alive in his own creative journey. Every new song he writes becomes a quiet tribute to the man who first showed him the joy of music. Even though Wolfgang Van Halen is building his own career, the legacy of Eddie Van Halen remains an important part of his life. Fans around the world continue to celebrate Eddie's influence on rock music, remembering the groundbreaking sound that made the band Van Halen famous. Guitar players still study his techniques, and many young musicians discover his music for the first time every year. Wolfgang understands how much his father's work means to people. Because of this, he often speaks carefully and respectfully when discussing Eddie's life. He knows that fans see his father as a hero, but he also wants people to understand that Eddie was a human being with both strengths and struggles. By sharing honest stories, Wolfgang helps create a fuller picture of who Eddie really was. He talks about the fun moments, the creative experiments in the studio, and the deep love Eddie had for his family. These stories remind fans that the man behind the legendary guitar solos was also a father who enjoyed simple moments at home.